if there are no supermarkets, a lot of us would go nuts in the current times, right? Culture of supermarkets actually came from America.
All of these enriched foods, enriched cereal, enriched bread, and enriched milk is actually full of things that are making people sick. So what's making people sick are what we're eating, the things that are being sprayed on it, the things that, the genetic things that are genetically modified. Now Bill Gates wants to put this appeal coat, this layer on it, to coat it because of the bugs. So all of that just makes me go back to, the importance of
Yeah.
me saving seeds and growing my own. There's a lot more conversation about seed saving. There's more kids that are doing community gardens at their school. So there's little steps of skill sets. I wish every child had to go through home economics and personal finance 4 years in high school to be able to graduate here. Like it has been a detriment for them to take out home economics, managing household systems, growing your food. They're basic skills that everybody deserves the right to learn, whether you live in a house or an apartment. I think everybody's got the right to at least have access to this way of thinking around food and nutrition. And
Yeah.
then what they do with it is up to them.
Whole culture of supermarkets actually came from America, specifically the north of America. The whole of the world sees supermarket as a norm because if there are no supermarkets, a lot of us would go nuts in the current times, right? So when you
Yeah.
mentioned about your grandma, ha, have you heard stories from her? Because you briefly mentioned about the jellies as well. How was the life back then without the supermarkets? Would you like to share like some stories and the differences that you see in the current times, and probably like what you have heard from your grandmother, because it would be very interesting to hear about it from someone coming from America about these differences and experiences.
Well, my grandmother, she passed away when she was 98, and that was in 2000, and want to say like 2009 or something. She came from the generation where they would walk to school in their bare feet, and they would walk a mile and a half to go to the local schoolhouse. She grew up outside of Portland in a very small, like, farming community called Kelso and in Boring, Oregon. And so a lot of, because it wasn't a condensed city, it wasn't like it is now. There was a lot more space. There was more people lived on property with their animals that they milked, that they got their milk from, that they made their butter from. My grandmother they made all those things based on, what they had on their property from the animal products. But then it was, every summer during berry season, they would go out to the fields and they would all pick berries. And then they would, it would be like a rite of passage where they would get the berries and they would do it as a family. They would then process the berries and as a family turn it into jam. And everybody had a part in that. And it was like a rite of passage or a ritual every year
Yeah.
when berry season came around. So, I grew up with her doing that. And then as I, came into motherhood and I started doing all these things, well, with kids, you kind of need stuff to do. And I wasn't one to just constantly put my kid in front of an iPad or something. So, going berry picking every July at my daughter's birthday, we would go blueberry picking. We would get Marion berries. We'd go out. There's farms all around Portland, all around the city. You don't have to go very far from the city central here in Portland to get to the farms. We even have urban farms here that do a lot of education, showing people how to grow. But where I live is also very farm minded. There's a lot of farmers markets. There's a lot of schools where kids learn how to grow a garden from farm to table. Farm to table is a really big thing, from seed to table. So kids learn the process of that. It's a real big thing to have urban kids learn how to grow a garden. Like, there's a
Right.
lot of openness and curriculum around that. And I know that there is around the world. So In terms of like, I was raised watching my grandma do some homestead skills. And then my mom, we were the generation of in the 70s and the 80s of the microwave.
Mm,
So, processed cereal, just all the processed food. It had its heyday in the 70s and 80s. And that's kind of what I was raised on because that was what was available at the supermarket. And
true.
my mom, you know, didn't the time my mom's a baby boomer, and at that time, it was just going to the grocery store and getting the food, and that was it. And it was also a lot of it was just convenience because both of my parents worked all day. So it wasn't unheard of to have a TV dinner. Like that was just part of the norm of growing up in the 70s. Well, then fast forward, I'm 29, 30 years old and I'm diagnosed with a nutritional disease called multiple sclerosis, and I'm doing everything in my power to get away from the foods that came from the convenience stores, getting back to the whole foods that weren't necessarily the foods that, my grandmother was raised with. I didn't get to that homesteader mindset first. What I got to was the importance of a plant-based foundation. So then, when it came to healing my body of nutritional disease, which is basically just eating a lot of sugar, a lot of processed food, maybe more heavy on the animal product and less on, the fruits and vegetables. So I just had to rearrange, take a lot of things out. And then I got reconstituted to going to the farmer's market to get my food, going to the grocery store and going around the perimeter of it instead of going into where all the stuff is. And then that just led into me when I became a mom, taking my kids berry picking and then going, wow, like maybe we should get jam that is, fresh made from the farm instead of buying something on the shelf. And so then I just started reverting to, can I get this local? Can I pick it? Can I grow it? I would just ask myself these questions, to the point now where I'm doing that with the forest. Now I'm into foraging for huckleberries, which is like the best berry on the planet. Very
Wow.
medicinal, very sacred berry. And so going foraging for mushrooms, for oyster mushrooms and morels and lion's mane, learning how to grow these things and mhm.
There's also an art to, do the right picking or how to pick them, because a lot of
Oh,
them
when to
could be
pick things.
poisonous.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
When to
that's,
pick it. Yeah.
and how did you learn? Like,
You mean foraging kind of picking? Like how to pick things out of the forest?
yeah, yeah.
Well, I grew up, we have a cabin up on Mount Hood, and I grew up going to the forest every weekend and going
Wow.
skiing every winter. Very, it was a very privileged upbringing, I do say. And I had a grandfather who, when I went to the forest, he had a real thing for naming the trees. So, Douglas fir and cedar and maple. And so I kind of grew up on, the trees being like beings almost. Like my grandfather would name the different kinds of trees, and then we would talk about the trees, and the trees are so huge and they're so knowledgeable. It's like just being there in the forest with my grandfather talking about the trees, with the trees, amongst the trees, just for me gave me a connection to the forest to learn how to listen to
Hmm.
the forest. So when I got older and I was really into Whole Foods and farmers markets and whatnot, I thought a little bit about. I'm not a prepper, but I thought, gosh, if something ever happened in the future and I didn't know how to eat out of the forest, I might starve. So I started with, my favorite berry in the on the planet is a huckleberry. And huckleberries only grow a certain time of the year. And there's only certain places that we can pick huckleberries if we're not native, because it's very sacred to the native tribes. It's grown it comes into the forest a certain time of the year. There's stories and traditions and cultures around it. And, it's also something bears like to eat. So it's not such something I thought, I'm going to go get huckleberries in the forest and I just, get out there with my basket. I want to be respectful to the native tribes. I want to be respectful to the bears, and I want to be respectful to the berries. All of it. They're they're really they're that big. Um, there's nothing else like that flavor. It's so sweet. It's like the sweetest blueberry you could imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it just looked like a blueberry to me.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
like a little. They're in the blueberry family, but they taste very different. It's so full of antioxidants. It's like twice as potent as a blueberry. It's just full of oxygen,
mm,
um, and they're so sweet. I can see why the bears, go in the forest and pick them. So when I uh, got a hold of my cousin, her husband is native, and so he knows how to go out into the forest in a respectful way. He knows, he has a knife, and he knows how to deal with the creatures of the forest if a bear was to come our way. So he kind of gave us a little instruction, and we went out into this field, and there was just thousands of berries. And so I just, you just get into, for me, just a zone, almost like a meditation, and I just start gathering the berries. And they're so expensive that when we were driving back to town, I think I might have gotten like a quarter of a gallon of a bag, a gallon bag. I got like a quarter of a bag.
mm.
And when I went back to town, I usually buy a quart of berries, but a gallon bag of huckleberries this year was $80. Last year it was $120. So the amount of berries that I gathered foraging, in the 3 hours that I did it was like such a small amount compared to the gallon bag that I purchased. So what I learned about foraging is that I can't get enough of it, and I want to keep doing it. Like, all I could think about was getting back out to the forest to do it again. Like, there's something about that gathering of that berry, because it tastes good, but it's highly medicinal and highly beneficial, like that elderberry. It's really, really good for the body, and fighting, viruses and things that are coming at us from all these directions. We can truly use the things in the forest, and a lot of these homestead skills and type, whole foods we can use to, deal with what's going to be coming at us. But a lot of what disease and illness comes from is what's in our food. It's like I was just listening to something about how they fortify dairy, and they fortify wheat, and they put folic acid into it. Well, I can't methylate folic acid. In fact, it absolutely comes in as a toxin. So all of these enriched foods, enriched cereal, enriched bread, and enriched milk is actually full of things that are making people sick. So what's making people sick are what we're eating, the things that are being sprayed on it, the things that, the genetic things that are genetically modified. Now Bill Gates wants to put this appeal coat, this layer on it, to coat it because of the bugs. So all of that just makes me go back to, the importance of
Yeah.
me saving seeds and growing my own. I don't think in terms of the work that I do having importance to humanity and the world anymore. I used to think like that. Like, my ideas matter. My ideas will help humanity. My ideas will help the country that I live in. I've stopped thinking like that. I think that's slightly delusional to think that way. And I think it's just a little bit of like Pollyanna mindset, that I truly feel like I want my ideas to change and heal the world. Well, I stopped thinking that way, and I started thinking more local. I
True.
started thinking about my water, where it comes from, if it's filtered, how clean can I get it? The food that I eat, the resources that I have, the plastic that I say no to, all the things that I consume is where I kind of put my attention. Not to where I'm obsessed about it, but I
Yeah.
stop and I pause for a minute before I put my money toward it. And I think, what benefit does this have, to my health? And is it going to benefit my health or hinder my health? And so I
Yeah.
really think about that with the bread that I buy. I don't buy bread anymore. I have a sourdough starter, and I make all my own bread products. So, and then I source the cleanest possible flour in the price range I can afford. And that doesn't necessarily mean the most expensive or the
Yeah.
most organic or the most anything, but I work with what I've got. And I can't focus on the world and what I'm doing to heal the world. What I can focus on is what I'm doing to heal my body and what I'm doing to support my children having the nutritional education to become adults and navigate the nutrition, um, you know, illness, chronic health condition world that manifests because of what we eat.
Yeah.
I don't want to say to my kids, if you eat this processed food, this is going to cause diabetes or cancer. But the reality is that these foods create these conditions. So I try not to overstimulate and overwhelm my children on food and food choices. I just really try to provide as much whole food as possible.
Yeah.
And they still eat the processed stuff. They still eat the sugar, but they at least stop and think about where it comes from.
Yeah.
And now my daughter came to me, my 17-year-old came to me. She goes, "Mom, you have bee pollen, don't you?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's in the fridge." And she goes, "Well, I read something about it being relating to what you talked about when you talked about it." So finally it's starting to sink in. Bee pollen can help her stimulate her immune system locally so that she's less reactive to the pollen that's flying around in the air when we're going in between seasons. So she started thinking on her own, if I take bee pollen, I can get some of these, I can get some vitamin and some nutrient, but I can also better regulate my allergies and
Mm.
the seasonal changes. And it's like she was raised with me telling her that, but finally on her own she realized that, read it somewhere, and then started on the bee pollen on her own.
Oh,
And
that's
that's
interesting.
the best I can do, is to just affect, with information, maybe the people around me that I care about. But that's really where I put my attention. Because if those people put their attention around the people they cared about, it would spread out and it would reach humanity. But instead of thinking about how what I'm doing is affecting the whole, I can only think local right now. I can only think local. What kind of soil is in my backyard? Is it organic and nutrient and living enough for me to grow vegetables and plant medicine that I can then bring onto my table from the seed, create a nutritious meal, make my plant remedies, heal myself, and then share that with the people around me that I then barter and trade with for other things that I can turn into remedies or concoctions or, food items. Like it just it feels like a simpler way to exist and live without all the complications of the store and the choices and the ingredients and all of the distractions for us to like just choose the drive through instead of just stopping and thinking about like, where is it coming from, where is the soil that's coming from that grew this food that I'm eating. And just for me, naturally coming back to the source of getting as local as possible, um, just came from me not feeling good eating certain food and realizing that it's the food that's making me sick.
Yeah.
So the closer I can get to the source, the better I'll feel. And now I can enjoy treats from time to time. I can enjoy holidays and birthdays and enjoy, some fun things that I normally don't eat all the time, because the rest of the time my guts are stable. But if I eat something slightly off or slightly processed, immediately I'll know it.
Yeah.
Immediately I'll know it. So I think it's about being in alignment with the soil, with the cycles of, animals, with the cycles of the plants, with the cycles of the seasons,
Yeah.
not eating berries in the middle of December when we know that July and August is kind of when they're at their peak.
Yeah.
Like seasonal eating is a whole other level. Like
Yeah.
that's a whole other
I think
topic.
this whole area is quite gray. Like if we look at it from a very high level, or like a complete picture, if you try to find answers there, I think a lot would make sense. Because definitely whatever you mentioned, I think the seasonal order of the fruits and veggies, and the same order we should consume it, and also considering the soil, its nutrients. it's still like very gray, in the current times to really understand
Well,
it. But
yeah,
like starting
yeah,
local and
yeah.
focusing on the seasonal eating, I think is very simple to start with, uh, for
I
sure. And
think it is
because
too, because the environment, like, you know, there's certain times of the year that apples, like we live in the Willamette Valley and we live in very volcanic soil, so it's very nutrient rich and everything grows here. We're known for our craft everything, beer, cider, wine, farmers markets, like everything. You can do almost anything in this climate. It's wonderful. So what I've been doing over the years is just going with the cycles of the season. Now the challenge of that is that I don't do enough canning to then go through that time of the year where I get into the root cellar and I'm eating out of the root cellar because of all of the preparation that I've done to get to the winter. Like that's a whole other level.
yeah,
What I do is I do my best to meet myself where I'm at. I don't have any fantasies of living on a homestead out in the, out in the countryside. I live where I live. I live in the city. So I do these little things to adapt. So I eat berries at certain times of the year. I'll eat hazelnuts at certain times of the year. Yes, I can access them all year round, but I try to give my body that natural rhythm of what's indigenous and local in on this landscape. What's, there's certain things that have been brought to this landscape that has been developed over you know many years. That's just kind of where I'm trying to focus on how I eat. And then you eat things out of storage. Like a lot of people that do eat animal products here, go in with different families and they'll buy an entire cow and then they'll pack that in the freezer. And so then, a lot of people just can eat off of that for the year. There's a lot of support for eating locally, eating seasonally, and eating mindfully. And I'm really thankful that in Portland, it's a place where there's communities of people that support eating this way and thinking this way, but also bartering this way. A lot of people
yeah,
have goats in the city. There's people that make goat cheese that trade their goat cheese for my topical, and I'll trade my topical to my friend that has the elderberries growing in her yard. So it feels more natural, and it does feel more indigenous minded to trade and barter for food to eat seasonally and to share our resources. Now I'm
yeah.
not going to do that with all of Portland because there's a
Mhm.
lot of people that just aren't into this. But I think when you align within yourself the connection to the soil and the earth and the land and the seeds and the plants and the animals, you automatically align yourself with people that also think this way too.
I agree. I
So
agree.
I know a lot of different people that have eggs that trade for elderberry, that trade for my remedies. And so we just have this network because this is where my mindset is. And these are the people that I draw in when I'm in conversation, making connections at the farmer's market
Yeah,
or even online. I've met quite a few people online as well, locally,
that's
who we
beautiful.
trade, my topical for her mushrooms. So you just, I think, gravitate toward people that, whether they're in your neighborhood or they're across town, it's like you gravitate toward people that have this consciousness that function this way. And this I would say it's underground, but this way of barter and trade hasn't it's always gone on. It hasn't gone anywhere since my grandmother's time. It's just not as prevalent in this day and age on the mainstream level. But I think that people are naturally reverting back to the skill sets. I think that's where it's turning. You're seeing people wanting to learn how to make sourdough. There's a lot more conversation about seed saving. There's more kids that are doing community gardens at their school. So there's little steps of skill sets. I wish every child had to go through home economics and personal finance 4 years in high school to be able to graduate here. Like it has been a detriment for them to take out home economics, managing household systems, growing your food. They're basic skills that everybody deserves the right to learn, whether you live in a house or an apartment. I think everybody's got the right to at least have access to this way of thinking around food and nutrition, And
Yeah.
then what they do with it is up to them. But I fully support, communities and bartering and trading amongst people. Like the people I trade with come from different cultures. So there's a lot of different cultural items and cultural flavors that get shared as well. And I feel like for me, it's what kind of gets me excited about my day,
Yeah.
you know, returning to
Uh,
the old ways.
that's very positive. I think it's such a motivational thing that you mentioned. But out of all the negative news you hear from the United States, I think this is one of the very positive thing that you're mentioning. At the local level, it already gives so much of hope. It's the people are
Yeah.
bringing things together. Things do make sense. And I think it would surely set very good examples for others to follow. Like
Well,
that's the
yeah.
most important thing. Starting small and setting examples, which
Yeah.
definitely are very meaningful in the current times. And
Well, and there's people that out there that do so much more than me. Like I'm just affecting the people that I care about the most. Like that's really who my audience is for what I do, or the people that are around me all of the time. There's so many cool permaculture communities.
yeah,
There's so many things going on, but it's all done, some of it has a Facebook page or an Instagram page, but there's so much of this lifestyle and thinking. Like in New York, they have eco gardens on the
yeah,
roofs of some of these buildings where there's community gardens. Like there's so many cool things going on. But unfortunately, as you know, the media portrays, even where I live, Portland, it's like it's portrayed in a way that is just full of news speak and propaganda. And so
and
I
guns.
all of it, it's not accurate, and
Yeah,
that's what bothers me the most, is that what's not getting out there are the stories of the people who live in the communities that are doing these things.
mm,
So, for me, I'm one person, but I'm one person who has rallied and gotten our neighborhood association back and running. So there's 2,500 people in my neighborhood who I'm trying to rally up and get together so we can have community safety meetings. We can, have community garden shares. There's a lot of possibility if we can just get together as our neighborhood association. And I'm just one person who I want to live in my community. I don't necessarily need to know all my neighbors and be have
of
barbecues and be
course.
best friends with everybody around me, but I want to have quality of life, and I want to have livability, and I want to enjoy where I live, even if it is low income, even if it is very culturally diverse and low income. We have an ability to enjoy our community, um, and it doesn't have to go beyond the community that I live in. And that's really where I'm focusing my attention, is how can the kids in the community learn about gardening. I invite kids in the community to come over and have dinner. I openly talk about cannabis with anybody. I don't care if it's a teenager, if it's an elder. I will talk about it with anybody, so that you know that the community has an opportunity to experience making pesto from your backyard, making sourdough bread from the starter that I've been working on for 3 months, or, you know, eating applesauce from, the apple tree growing in my backyard. It's like the kids are like, wow, really? Like this, you picked this and now I'm eating it? Like it's so mind blowing. It's so mind blowing to the kids that, like, this was done in this way. But then the excitement that I see when they do it themselves
Yeah,
is, like I taught a kid how to use the juicer the other day, and it was like, it was like, turning on a video game for the first time. It was just
yeah,
something that was tangible and real, and they knew the whole time they were doing it, it was healthy for them, because I was looking up in a book, what ginger is and what spinach is and what all the things that they were putting in there, what benefit it had to the body. So then when they were drinking it, it's like they were making the connection between, the garden and the plant, and the process of it and the nutrition into the body. It's like, and I've just learned, honestly, that it's just about plant literally, this is so ironic, but it's just about planting seeds in people, planting seeds of ideas or seeds of thought. That if I can just show somebody how I'm doing it, this is my template, these are my ideas, this is, what works for me, and I plant that seed. Like with my daughter, she came back to me with that seed of information and she said, I heard this and I remember you saying that, but now it kicked in. And so really that's the best that we can do to pay forward what we know of the lifestyle we have. That's, the lifestyle I have because I have, multiple sclerosis, I have a brain injury and an autistic brain. And so the lifestyle that I have comes from my own suffering. So the nutrition that I put into my body is my medicine. My food is my medicine and it goes into my body. And so, I should be in a wheelchair. I should be walking with a cane. There's a lot of things that I should be doing, but my body is where it's at because I'm using I'm using my environment to help me heal. I'm using my local food to help me heal. I'm using the activity of going outside every day and putting my hands in the soil to help me heal. And so
Mm.
all of these things, plus I can make a really great topical for days that my hands are stiff or my body doesn't feel good. And so all of these things that I'm doing, I do because it's what's helping me heal and it's helping me to suffer less, to eat this
Right.
way, to grow medicine this way. And so if my ease of my suffering can help somebody else, that's why I share it.
Yeah. Yeah, kudos to you. I think that's
Yeah.
really brilliant. Whatever you're doing, and I think all around the world there's sort of an awakening as well around this,
Mhm.
and which is also very good to hear and see, and that people are quite active at the smaller community levels and local farmers.